Ken, it is such a gift to have you with us. We've been asking the same two questions to a lot of friends, family, leaders that we admire and track with. So the first question is really rooted in Matthew 16, where Jesus says to the Pharisees, you can look at the sky and forecast the weather. Why can't you read the signs of the times? So essentially a question around what the Spirit's doing right now so that we can jump aboard. Second question, which we'll get to, is just personally, what are you learning? But let's start with reading culture. You spent 40 years working in the financial world. You still provide leadership to a financial fund. You also are a writer. You are someone that reads the Times. I know you prefer the Telegraph, but in the sense that we're meaning it, you do read culture in a remarkable way. And you are one of the voices, the key voices, honestly, in my life that's helped me read the Times and learn to track with the Spirit. You've played such a significant role in my life. So it is an absolute privilege to have you here. But to ask you the question, this is a crazy moment. Where do you see God at work right now?
Well, Pete, firstly, thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you, to talk to you, see what you're doing and the church that you're stewarding. And you and B have done an amazing work there, preparing us for these times in many ways, in your connection with younger people. And yes, I think it's an important question. It's like the sons of Issachar. Not only could they see, read the signs of the times, but they knew what action to take.
Yeah.
And I think this is the most difficult, because anyone can read the signs of the times and come to a view, and there are lots of futurologists.
Yeah.
But that is not what we're wanting to do. What I think is happening is that there's been this global, almost as if the Lord was saying, stop, just stop. I'm not saying that that's the cause that he caused all of this. I'm just saying it's a byproduct of what has happened. And if you think about it, there's a complete perfect storm of global pressures. We've forgotten, but it's 6 months ago, not 6 years ago, that we saw the Thunberg revolution sweeping, children out in demonstrations, in schools on climate change, environment, fires in Australia, California, and then sweeping through the world, the pandemic that tested our health services, our governments, our institutions. And then in its wake comes the Black Lives Matter issues. It is as if there is a forcing of a new way of thinking right in every major area of our lives, and it is global. It's not just a pocket here or a pocket there. So I think we need to stop and say, can we read all these signs together?
Yeah.
Or does it force us back to say, we need to take the Spirit of God into our hearts and understand what the balance between reason, assessing with day-to-day structures, our intelligence, the gifts God has given us, and revelation. We need to hold revelation and reason together as we try and talk amongst ourselves to assess where we are and where we're going.
Yeah, I love that, Ken. That's really profound. Reason and revelation. We'll talk about both, really, because I guess faith, is we talk about living by faith and not by sight. In other words, it's not just built on reason. This is a moment where we're going to need faith, because we can't see the road ahead with absolute clarity, but we have to trust that God is leading us. How do you nurture faith in a moment like this?
Well, it's a good word, the nurturing of faith. And of course, reason and revelation comes straight out of the first chapter of Ephesians, where Paul tells us to have these two drawn together. And nurturing faith is very important. And the way one has to do that is, firstly, that it is a personal journey. But it's not only a personal journey. So the personal journey is that we listen to people who speak faith into our lives, who speak hope into our lives. And this is not just sheer optimism. No one knows how the story is going to end.
Yeah.
And I think of Joseph of Arimathea,
You just written a book on?
A book on.
Nice little plug.
Nice little plug. He took the body of Christ down from the cross into a tomb on Silent Saturday, struggling on Saturday, had no idea that Celebration Sunday was coming. And faith is simply being able to follow the story when you don't know how it's going to end.
Wow.
That requires us to not only nurture ourselves in the scriptures, hear from the those who are interpreting the scriptures, people that we're preaching in our Sundays, our services, but also to speak to each other and to encourage each other in terms of the belief that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
I mean, that's an amazing picture of Joseph of Arimathea, in the sense of in a moment of grief. You know, you said Silent Saturday, so he's in an experience of grief, and yet there's such phenomenal hope that's about to break in a day's time. And I wonder if, you know, we find ourselves in globally a moment of deep, deep grief, and yet choosing to believe that we do not grieve as those who have no hope, that there is hope, that maybe we are nearer than ever of some form of awakening, a move of the Spirit. I know that's what you and many others have been praying for, contending for. Can I ask you about hope then? Because I saw you post on your Instagram a picture of you protesting, but also it took you back to when you were in your early 20s, a young student in South Africa, many, many, many years ago.
The other day, Pete, but the other day.
Only just the other day, where you were part of something extraordinary happening in South Africa, contending for change. And then fast forward the clock, however many years, something similar is happening. Just reflect on those two journeys, the journey back then as a young student, and then your journey now, seeing something extraordinary happening on our streets.
Well, they couldn't be more different. And then, sort of with 50 years ago, 68, the great, the world itself was sort of seeing convulsions, demonstrations throughout the world. But ours was very particular. It was against an abhorrent system of apartheid. But we were struggling against the law. So it's much easier when you can see the law. The laws are iniquitous. You're fighting against them, demonstrating against them, and other horrible things happening. Whereas now, into thinking on why I would have joined the march, as I know you did, is actually we're trying to see not the law changed, but behavioral and cultural attitudes change, much more difficult.
Yeah.
Going back to those early days, I mean, I think one had that Marxist sense that the world was never going to change. Oppression was going to be so awful, it had to be overthrown in South Africa, and very little hope for the future. Nelson Mandela was in jail and in prison at the time, and there was a big clampdown on any form of protest. 50 years later, I think I'm in a different position. I do have a hope, which wasn't one that was merely expecting that sometimes some political change would happen, but a hope that is available to each one of us right now to know that the things that we hope for may not come about. But the person that we're hoping in is still there, is active, is engaged, is working in our lives, and the Spirit of God is enabling us to actually move into the future space and assess that in our day-to-day lives, by which I mean that I know that there will be a tomorrow. I may be talking to you. I may be, talking to the Lord, asking him a lot of questions because life continues. But we know there is a future. But what we need to do now is to be shrewd about assessing what needs to happen. The world needs hope. What the world most needs, we have. And somehow or another, we haven't managed to get that word across, that encouragement across, to enable people in lockdown everywhere to understand that there is a hope. There are marriages under stress, schooling of kids, jobs not there, uncertain what's going to happen, fearful. I mean, I'm the same. I fear those things. So I therefore have to draw into the depths of the scriptures, talk to friends, to enable us to see that there is a hope that will come through. And I hope that what comes through this will be a new awakening, a new sense of a spirituality that we've not known before. Because we're going to rethink what we eat. We're going to rethink the way we live. Our health is going to become so much more important. And the workplace is going to change dramatically. I always put it this way. My grandson will say to my son, "What did Grandpa mean when he said he went to work? Where is that?" So we have to see multiple uncertainties, and yet know that by reason and revelation we can navigate day to day to a broader picture of security by the Spirit of God in our lives.
That's incredible. Let's just talk about the uncertainty then, when everything's changing, work patterns, home life patterns, so much changing. You've said to me in some of our personal conversations, Pete, like, hold your nerve. In a moment of uncertainty, don't just sort of try and grab for control by trying to mark out clearly the road ahead and ... This is a moment to hold your nerve. And I can see it around me and I feel it within me of like, I need to hold on to something that feels more certain. How do we hold our nerve in this moment? I've heard you talk about like the fermentation process. So just talk us through that and how we can live in this moment, trusting in God, holding on to God, and therefore being okay with, a lack of clarity, if you like.
Well, the first is that we are facing a spiritual crisis in which we were slightly cocky, I think, over the years, believing that we could manage, slot it into one of our programs to, feeling good about the church, the growth, the planting, whatever it might be. And at that moment, we're now coming to a place where we're being stripped back. So there is an uncertainty that immediately results, well, maybe I don't control. And that, of course, is the first building block of hope for the future, is someone else controls the situation. Secondly, live in contracting horizons. When in the Sermon on the Mount, we're talking about, sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Just trying to live in a contracting horizon doesn't mean to say you lose hope for the future. On the contrary, what it does say is I'm going to live for today as best I can, leaving the context of the whole to be in the hands of the Spirit of God, who will begin to unfold step by step. Third, it's a frustrating experience because we're trying to bring about situations and change things that we're incapable of doing. And therefore, the frustration is this constant bumping of heads. But unfortunately, it's the left side bumping into the right side, half of me with the other half, like a civil war all the time. I'm so frustrated. I can't see friends. I can't talk. I can't. As a very wise person said to me, you see frustration, but God sees fermentation. In other words, He's allowing us to stew in this moment, knowing that we have hope for the future, but have to get through today. And the stewing process, a rethinking of basic principles, most particularly to know your who. Wrote a book, another plug. Know your why. But the more I think about it, the more I think that this time is asking the question to know your who. Now, who are you as a person? You come to terms with yourself that this time that you've been alone, talking to others in lockdown, and are you at ease with your God, at ease with yourself, and at ease with your neighbors? Big question. Identity, know your who.
You've often said to me historically when you've just been coaching me, like, stay in your grace zone. Like we all have an area in which we flourish, where we're operating according to our gifts, and there can be a tempting to think, almost the kind of selfish ambition. What if I step out and try and just expand? And I think what you've just been saying about sort of like embracing a level of contraction in a season so that you can actually expand in time according to your grace zone. That's really fascinating. What do you encourage people, in terms of practically, how do you stay in a grace zone?
Well, for the first thing to remember is if you try and expand now, for sure, you're going to end up making the wrong decisions because we don't know how this is going to pan out. 2-year plans, 3-year plans don't work. So we have to live in this contracted planning horizon for the here and now, so that we're able to deal with the issues we face today. And the greatest gift that anybody of leadership quality now is flexibility. You have to be able to read the signs, and they change day after day, week after week, to read them and to adapt models, ways of responding to the changing patterns. Who knows whether this digital excitement that is going to replace church as we've known it? I suspect it won't. But I do suspect that there's a profound change, not simply because it's digital, but because there's a cultural change in the entire society around us. So navigating that day to day means that one has to be alert to the shifting thought processes, the shifting sands, sometimes of which society is built on, and say it is a shifting sand, we're not going there. And an element of divine restraint rather than human enthusiasm. And if you want me to put it technically for you, Pete, as I would want to put
I always do.
There is kinetic energy, which is the energy that comes from oneself, which is pushing along. And there's pneumatic energy, which comes from the spirit. And what one needs to do is to not see one or the other, but to marry the kinetic. We want to get on. We want to achieve with the pneumatic. We want the Spirit of God to lead us day to day, but within a broader picture that He well understands, but for all ages has planned for us.
Yeah, love that. Ken, talk briefly about then. This you've been preaching from a poem. I've heard you quoting this poem about the caged bird. Just talk us through that and what you feel like the Spirit's saying right now.
Well, Maya Angelou, the great African-American civil rights activist, wrote this book, which is a part biography. I know why the caged bird sings. And I've been really arrested by that because if I ever felt like a caged bird, and don't look too moral, let me say to you, I ever looked like a caged bird, I feel it now.
Yeah. And
my wings feel clipped.
Yeah.
What I want to do, the people I want to meet, the achievements, it just seems to be in lockdown. But it is, of course, that the Spirit of God is why we can sing. And the people of Israel sang in captivity by the river of Babylon. You might remember the song, Too Young.
By the rivers of Babylon. I remember it.
There we are. How do you sing in captivity? Because a song is something that comes from the inside. It speaks of a liberation, even when the bird is in the cage.
Yeah.
And the poem, as she goes on to talk about the wonderfully fat worms that exist outside, and yet you can be in a lockdown mode with a spirit that is freed, because that is what the Spirit of God does. He enables us to roam beyond ourselves and outside of ourselves, so that the lockdown is actually a God lock. It's a time when the Spirit of God is working within us and enabling us just in our day-to-day decisions. What do I do today? How much time do I spend on my own? Time with, homeschooling. Unfortunately, I don't do that, but you do.
Out.
And, how much time is being spent at work, on Zooms or whatever?
Yeah.
There are things that we can control.
Yeah.
But which also enable us to be at liberty, at peace, while we are doing it. That is the great heritage of the Christian in lockdown.
Yeah, amen. Final question then, Ken, which is just a personal one then, because it's, there's a shared experience, a global experience, and then there's a unique experience of what we're all going through and where the Lord's at work within us. What have you been learning yourself then about life, about the kingdom in this season?
Well, I think the first thing was reintroducing myself to myself, because in a sense, for many of us, the ego gets ahead of itself in terms of what we're doing, what we're achieving, where we're going, the paths that we're on. And you come to a time like this where actually it has to rein in.
Yeah.
Where it cannot simply achieve what it wants to. And that is, a God at work in the individual person, enabling a realignment of our hopes, our desires with those of God, and dealing honestly with the shadows or the fantasies that we have developed about ourselves.
Yeah.
Such that there is a new realism. And that is a day-to-day spending more time. So I have found really looking forward to times of quiet in the morning, of praying and worshiping and reading, as I haven't had up to now. I've enjoyed spending time with my wife. We've been talking and praying together as we never have before. So I think, that piece has meant a lot to getting a stable base. Of course, there's the work to be done and the Zoom calls that exhaust all of us. But it's equally important to retain a time when you talk to different people, different networks of your friends, some in church, some from football, some from work, in order to create a curiosity about other people and their interests and be able to input into their lives such that we can continue to be helpful and supportive to others. And I found that very, very stimulating, although it's tough when you can't, I can see you, but I can't touch you.
Ken, I could listen to you all day and want to thank you for the life.
People
other people dial out. But and I want to thank you for your example. Like, I do think of you as a young 20-year-old, putting yourself at risk, being part of a movement in South Africa contending for justice and peace and change. And then the 50 years that followed, you've continued to be an advocate for, justice, peace, contending for kingdom breakthrough. And your faith is as alive now as it was then. And you are, a true inspiration to us. So we thank you and sending you huge love. Thanks for joining us. God bless.
Lovely to have been with you. Keep well.